Good morning, Olive Branch family.
And welcome to our online service.
My name is Trudy.
My name is Pearl.
And usually you would see Pastor Jeremiah or Kathy here hosting, but today is a very special youth edition of our Sunday service.
Our in-person service, the youth have taken over every aspect of the church, including worship, greeting, and more.
And we're so excited to join you all online today.
Our amazing lead pastor, Ken, is doing his finale of his series Top 4 in 2024 on love.
It's been a great series so far, and we can't wait for what he has for us this morning.
But Trudy, don't you think it would be great to see those who are online in person and join us, especially when we youth take over Sundays in the future?
Sure would. Well, next Sunday, we're having a new series based off of the hit TV show The Chosen, a show that dives into the life of Jesus as he walked on earth.
What an awesome opportunity to come in person, and I also was told that we are encouraged to watch the next episode before next Sunday.
Yeah, Pearl, and some ways you can do that is to check the description box down below or to monitor the socials throughout the week.
This is so exciting, I can't wait.
Well, same here. Well, service is starting soon, we gotta skedaddle.
Yes, let's worship together and have an amazing Sunday.
We're at the very end of a series of talks dealing with the top 4 in 2024. In other words, what is it that you really want for 2024? And that's a great question, isn't it? What do you want? What do you really want? So I thought about this and I thought, well, I'm guessing most people would like to have peace for themselves, peace in our world. Most people would like to experience health, especially after the pandemic. We want to be healthy. Most people need money because what has happened in the last few years has made living more difficult, more expensive. And then the last thing was about love. We all want love. Love is one of these endemic needs in our lives. We all want to be loved. Now, this really gets complicated though. What do you really want? Because you see, when it gets down to, if we were to be really truthful about this, most of us would say, well, I want my own way. I want to be right all the time, 24/7. We want pleasure. I want a perpetual pleasure, like 24/7. I don't want to go through any pain. And then finally, I want it all now. The problem is that these things actually can have a way of kind of sabotaging what we really want. You think about this, if you really want peace, if you have to have your own way, well, it's going to sabotage that. You can kind of plow ahead and you can get your own way and you can be large and in charge and push other people out of the way. And you can have your own way, but you won't have peace because people around you creates all kinds of anxiety, all kinds of relational problems. Perpetual pleasure, well, the problem with that is that, it kind of evens out and then tapers off, where it doesn't bring pleasure anymore and it leads to addiction. That's what addicts us, is that we need to have perpetual pleasure. And then I want it now. That creates all kinds of problems. These 3 things create all kinds of problems with having love. If you want love and you have to have it your own way, it's going to sabotage it. Perpetual pleasure, that's going to sabotage it too. I want it now, that's going to sabotage love. And then if love folds and creates, divorce or creates, breakup in a relationship, then that affects your peace, that affects your health, and it affects your money. Just talk to, somebody, rich and ask them why they have to have a prenup agreement, because of the fact that this will take you down. So these are all things that we want. And yet you have to be careful with them because it can be tricky, that if you have to have your own way and have pleasure and have it now, it creates all kinds of other problems. When it comes to love, when it comes to the relational world, we want our families to love us. We want to, be loved by our friends. We want to be loved by the persons we're attracted to. But a big part of this is that we are kind of driving under the influence of Disney and Hallmark and Hollywood, which all tell us, that you find the right one. And if you find the right one, it'll, solve all your problems. It solves your loneliness. You'll find your soulmate. You'll find your forever love, total package. And, especially with Disney, you find this person and, well, they all lived happily ever after. It solves all the problems. Now, I think we know that's not true. And it's especially not true, when you look at somebody who found the one, they found the one, but it was 1.0, and now it's 2.0, the one 2.0, and they're still getting disentangled from, the one 1.0. Now, this talk isn't going to solve any problems. I realize that, But hopefully, what I want to do, and if it just does this in a little small way, point you in the right direction, then I will have accomplished what I'm hoping to accomplish. So are you okay with that, Because there's lots of other factors of this, okay? Now, here's the question I want to ask. How many of you believe in fairy tales? How many of you used to believe in fairy tales, How many of you did until you saw, the Jerry Springer show, which, kind of finally went off the air in late 2018 or something like that. Over the past few years, I've probably done 250 weddings. So I've been involved in a lot of people's lives, in their love lives, their marriages, and so on. And I've watched, what has happened since then, And here's what happens. Sometimes, people walk down the aisle and they think it's Miss Right or Mr. Right, and they look at each other with tears in their eyes, and then, 2 years later, they're screaming at each other. They can't stand each other. So what happened? How is it that a person that they thought was the one, the right person, the total package, the one who was going to solve all their problems, suddenly wasn't the one? Years ago, I asked a group of young singles, a number of young singles at the Olive Branch, what the whole dating and romance scenario was like, and one of them said, well, it's scary and confusing, and at the total bottom end of the list was, it's like slowly being decapitated. In other words, it creates a lot of pain. Now, here's the thing, okay? I love you. I care about your lives. I care about, you having a great future. I care about you, finding somebody that you can love and who will love you. I care about those of you who are now single or single again or single again. And believe me, I'll tell you, let me just give some disclaimers. I am not the smartest person in any room, okay? But I've seen life. I've watched life happen, And there have been times when I've wondered, I'm not trying to be, condescending or anything, but there are times when I've wondered, didn't your mom or dad talk to you about this? Didn't your friends warn you about this? How come you didn't see this coming? Now, first thing is, like I said, I'm not the smartest person in any room. I know that, okay? But I have worked with a lot of people and a lot of relationships over the years, over the past 40 years, and I've learned some of this from my own, pain, and I've also learned some of this from great books and great authors. And we're partners with Andy Stanley and with the North Point Church. And I'm telling you, this is one of the best books on dating that I've ever read. This is just an excellent book. I wish I'd had it when I was in youth ministry. But so there are some great books out there, and I'd be glad to lend them to you if I can. But, some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, why are you, doing a message on this when probably most of the people, or at least half of the people who are listening, are married? Well, it's because of the fact that when a relationship goes south, when there's pain in a relationship, it spreads through the whole family. It spreads through the whole relational group. It just kind of flows out of nowhere, and it really hurts a person deeply and continues to flow out through their lives. So for the next few minutes, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go after this right person myth, okay? Because I think we're all vulnerable to it. And so the right person myth goes something like this. If I find and marry the right person, it will solve my problems. It will settle, the problems that I have with my life. So this is kind of how it goes, okay? It plays out in our culture over and over again in movies and, through Disney and Hallmark and everything. And I'm just going to exaggerate a little bit just for the sake of emphasis and so on. But when a person is looking for the right person, out there looking for the right person, and they find somebody else who's attracted to them who's also looking for the right person, man, chemistry. It's like this explosion, confetti and, a song, at last I found the person who's going to solve my problems, and everything will be all right. Now, chemistry is amazing stuff, okay? When you're on love drugs, which is what chemistry is, it's like, we just talk for hours, and he understands me, he gets me, and she gets me, and I just can't keep my mind off of him, and he can't keep his mind and maybe his hands off of me, and chemistry is amazing stuff. I don't want to underestimate it. So two people get together, and they're in love, and nobody has ever felt this way before. And what happens next? Well, the movies, Hollywood tells us what happens next. It's intimacy, and two people get together, and because they're made for each other, and because it's the right person, the intimacy increases, and it just keeps on going. And, in a world like ours, kind of the guideline for this is, well, you never buy a car without a test drive, unless you're buying it from somebody, buying somebody who's, been on hundreds of test drives. And because they're the right person, everything is going to be okay. And they really feel nobody has ever been in love like this. We have a song and we need to be together. And so they get married or move in, and then they have chemistry, okay? But that's all they've ever had was chemistry. And they don't know about relationships because, you see, the right person was going to know what to do about the relationships, and that's why they're the right person. And when you tell somebody who's involved in some kind of a chemistry experience, about this kind of stuff, they say, well, I don't need to know this stuff, You need to learn to be forgiving. You need to learn to be kind. You need to learn to be patient. And they think, well, I don't need to be patient because the right person will be so right, I won't have to be patient with them. And I'll need to be kind because I will never feel like being unkind because they're the right person. But when they get together, when they get married, and they begin to have problems. And these aren't chemistry problems. These are relational problems. And guess what relational problems begin to affect? Guess what begins to suffer? Well, the chemistry. And things begin to cool off, both in the home and in their hearts. And some guys in our culture get really confused at this point, and they begin to think, well, if we had more sex, that would solve things. And girls think, well, that's not how it works. And what's confusing is that, the chemistry, the part that was, flowing so well, the part that was, going so hot, and it was the right thing, and this was the right person, the chemistry begins to suffer from this, from the relational problems. It's the right person myth. And the saga continues. Sometimes, one person in the relationship, thinks to themselves, and many times it's the woman, I know what will draw us together. We'll have a baby. Oh, that's brilliant. You bring another person into this dysfunctional relationship, Guys think, well, that's great. That'll require sex. Now, there's another wrenching stat in this that comes into play in this, There are 2 or 3 times, in a marriage when a man is most vulnerable to an affair. You know when one of them is? It's when his wife is pregnant, okay? And you think, ooh, what a scumbag. Who would ever go out and do something like that when his wife is trying to solve the problems by having a baby, Because the guy realizes my needs aren't coming first anymore. They're like second or third or at the tail end of the list. And it creates problems. So a guy or a girl is in a disappointing relationship like this. They're at work one day, and guess who they meet? They meet the right person, and the whole thing starts all over again. And you know why, second relationships, after a divorce end up many times in a divorce have a much higher percentage? It's because people go into another relationship doing the same thing that they did the first time. It's like Groundhog Day, except that the faces change, and the places change. And that's a problem. And I'll tell you, if you're listening to this and you're part of the Olive Branch or at least part of our outside community, I want so much more for you than that. Relationships can be fulfilling and they can be satisfying. They can be the most powerful thing in your life, but I'm telling you, it takes work. And finding the right person just isn't going to make that happy. Now, you don't see this in any film, do you? In the film, in the Disney films, there's a problem, and then the right person comes along and he solves the problem and sweeps the girl off her feet, and they live happily ever after, or, the other movies, they're filled with all this scheming and lying and all this stuff and affairs and everything like that. And then, they find each other. The problem is that happy marriages are boring, and I don't want to make a movie about that, But the myth, if you meet the right person, everything is going to be okay. That's just not true. It's a fairy tale. And here's the big idea behind what I'm saying, and I hope you hear this because this is so, so, so important. It goes like this. Instead of finding the right person, why don't you become the right person? And this is the question that every person has to take to heart. Are you who the person that you're looking for is looking for? Are you who the person that you're looking for is looking for? A lot of people who just assumed that, meeting the right person was going to solve all their problems, and it ended up in hurt and resentment and rejection and all kinds of feelings and so on. Let me talk about this for a minute. A few years ago, I was asking some young adults who were on the search. I found out that the meanings of some of the terms have changed, like date now would be translated as let's hang out together or whatever. So I know that, okay? I'm aware of that. So the question is, what are you looking for? in a person. And so the things that they were looking for is that they're looking for character, and they're looking for someone who's authentic and so on. And the problem is, in a culture like ours, are you going to figure out whether or not somebody has character, or whether somebody, is authentic or not by looking at their webpage, or by looking at, their Instagram, account, or Facebook, or anything like that? Probably not. Because what a person is putting on there is like their hottest shots, the things that have been kind of, pixeled out. And so a person would never say, well, what you see, no, I'm not authentic. What you see is pixels. That's all you see. Nobody wants that. And yet many times that's where somebody is basing their attraction on. And as I researched this, one of the stories that just grabbed my attention was about a girl that grew up in a Christian home and so on. And she went off to university and so on, and then, into the single life and dating life and all this stuff. And so she's kind of going on with the whole thing that goes on out there, And she puts it like this, she says, I was still a Christian. I still believed in Jesus, but I just didn't invite him on my dates, okay? Well, one night she's at this gathering, and she met this really great guy. She described him to her mom as the total package. He was good looking, and he was serious about his work and fun to be with, and everything that she wanted. And it's kind of an added bonus. He had a real deep spiritual component to his life. He followed Jesus, and that was really clear. And that kind of tugged at her about something from her past, about where she had been and what she really wanted. So she went home and she told her mom all about him, and that he was all that she was thinking about those days. And he was a serious believer, and on. And she hoped that maybe they would be able to meet again someday and maybe even be together. And her mom said to her something along this line, sweetheart, the problem is that a guy like that is not looking for a girl like you. And she said, man, that went to my heart. And her mom wasn't trying to be cruel. Her mom wasn't a mean person at all. And she knew that. She was just being truthful. And she ended up in a puddle on the floor. But this was a defining moment for her. And she describes it as a day when everything changed. She says, everything changed. My values, my dating habits, my friendships. I took a whole new direction with my life. It's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And it's Andy Stanley who coined this. Are you who the person you're looking for is looking for? Because that changes everything. That changes everything. What are you looking for? Honesty, I'm thinking, would be one of the characteristics. Kindness would be one of them, Character, sense of humor. But you don't find that on Instagram. You don't find that on dating websites. And you sometimes don't even find that in the first, months that you're dating somebody or you're with somebody. Are you like that? See, is that who you are? Because if you're looking for somebody like that, then that's who they're going to be attracted to. Are you becoming the person? Are you becoming the person? Who the person that you're looking for is looking for? Are you leaning into it? Because you see, that will change everything. Now, if you want to look into biblical history and stuff like this, and you can read through this from cover to cover, you will not find a whole lot of things about finding somebody that you want to marry and what you ought to look for and what you ought to do and so on. If it comes to the dating scene, there's Samson, who always seemed to find Miss Wrong, and she eventually killed him, so that's not cool, Or there's Esther, who spent, like a year in makeup therapy, becoming, preparing for the one night that she was going to spend, with the king, okay? When you approach the whole relational quadrant from, who you're becoming, well, then everything changes because there's lots of stuff on that. Someday, you want to hear somebody say to you, you light up the room when you come into it. I am so in love with you. I want to be with you. And when I think about you, my heart melts, and I have so much respect for you. That's what you want to hear. And if you're single, what I want you to hear is, I am yours forever. Faithfully, I will be there for you. I'm not looking for you to do something for me. I am in love with you, and I want I want to love you that way. But it doesn't happen automatically, where you're like playing the lottery. It doesn't, happen when you just date enough guys and be with enough guys or enough girls. You're going to find it's going to be like, the Lotto 649 or something like that. It just doesn't happen that way. But it will happen if you learn how to love. Now, there's another side to this, Somebody, sometimes thinks to themselves, well, if they really love me, they ought to accept me, even when I'm mean and even when I'm unkind and even when I'm jealous and even when I'm selfish, and, mean-spirited and jealous and envious. They ought to still love me. That's just who I am. Well, it's nice to say that, but that kind of stuff wounds people. It wounds relationships, and so that's not where somebody's going to want to be. And so what needs to happen is this spiritual component of how we are needs to change in the inside of us. Many of you are familiar with 1 Corinthians 13. If you're married, you maybe had this read at your wedding. It's the love chapter. But as you read through that chapter, you realize that this is not like chemistry love. This is not the love that you trip and fall into at some point. This is not about finding the right person kind of love. This takes action, and it takes character. Listen to what it says. It's describing the person that you want to be, that you want to become. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Now, we don't have time to go through all of these different characteristics, but I want to go through several of them that I think could be really helpful, and it's going to be basically the first 5. And the first one is patience. Now, many times we see patience as kind of the opposite of impatience, but let me tell you exactly what this means relationally. This means that you don't put pressure on somebody, that they don't have to eggshell around you, that it's not, well, you ought to, and why don't you, where you're pushing, and shoving that person ahead so that they kind of fit with you. Patience doesn't do that, okay? Think about your relationships and your friendships. Have you ever had somebody, who, gets angry and yells at you and distances themselves from you because you won't do what they want and you won't do it when they want and so on? You understand the dynamics of how, I want my own way, I want perpetual pleasure. I want it now. Can you understand how that affects your relational world? It just does. Impatient people are high-maintenance people. And tell you, this is going to be trouble. And that's the question, isn't it? Do people have to eggshell around you? Do they have to avoid your moods? Do the people close to you feel like the weight of your expectations on them pretty much any time they go in the room? Do they feel your displeasure, when they aren't who you think they ought to be? I'm telling you, patience, long-suffering is maybe one of the most beautiful qualities in the world. And it's a life pattern. It's not something you magically parachute in when you need it. It's who you want. And if you want your relationships to last, patience is going to be critical to that. It's powerful. It's powerful. And it's an amazing thing to be involved in a relationship with someone who's patient. And love is also kind. It's considerate, It's considerate of your time, even when your day isn't going well, even when there are things that frustrate you. Becoming a considerate person is thinking continually about the other person. Don't you want somebody that you're in a relationship with to be thinking about you and thinking about where you're at? It's being kind like Jesus. Jesus said, that love is treating other people as you would want to be treated. And if you look at his life and you look at how he was kind with people and how he treated people, even people who treated him awfully, you'll see a little bit about what this means. And here's the converse truth to that. You don't want to be married to an unkind person. You don't want to be married to an inconsiderate person who basically tramples on you, when you get in their way. The third quality is a negative one. Love does not envy. Love is not jealous. And we don't think about that whole lot, okay? And they're both, kind of forms of hatred. But I'd be willing to bet that some of you come from families where if there had been a lack of jealousy and lack of envy, that your parents' marriage may have lasted. When it comes to, a woman, sometimes she's exceeding and she's doing well in her pay and so on, and people are looking up to her and she's moving ahead in her job. And a husband looks at her and he can't stand that because she's getting ahead of him. And he starts to do things that crumble that. And the core idea here is, if I can't be happy, you're not going to be happy either. I will make your life miserable. Relationally, sometimes a wife sees her, women notice and appreciate and admire her husband, and it drives her nuts. She can't stand it, And so the point is, I'm just going to drag you down, I'm going to take you down. This stuff destroys relationships. And love doesn't boast, isn't proud. Let me just do kind of a timeout on this thing, How many of you think that, you think about this, you think, well, I'll be nice and you'll be nice and we won't burp at the table, and we'll be considerate of each other and so on, and it will be the most boring relationship in the world. It sounds like a really bad church service. But think of this in terms of the home that you grew up with. What if you had grown up with a dad who didn't need to be right all the time, and he was able to admit it when he wasn't? What if you'd grown up with a mom, who wasn't like the Teflon wall when it came to criticism? She could never hear anything except the good stuff. Would it be different? Maybe 100% different? See, the amazing thing about God is that he's the God of the second chance, and he puts up with us, and he loves us, and he helps us to grow. And then he gives us the power to change. The power of the Spirit, it says that the fruit of the Spirit, the result of the Spirit working in our lives, is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and self-control. So if you engage with him, he will help you to become the person you're looking for, who they're looking for. Becoming is the key to all that. And then there's the really juicy quality, Love does not dishonor others. You know what that means? It means that when you date somebody, you never do anything that creates regret. I'm guessing that you have a few regrets in your portfolio, where you think, oh my word, I wish I'd never, picked up the phone. I wish, I'd never caught his eye. I wish that I had just, never gone out with him, deleted his phone number from my cell phone, whatever. We all have regrets like that. And this means that you will never become that person. You never treat somebody, disgracefully or respectfully or indecently or crudely. And sometimes, in a relationship, when sex becomes a part of it, it's like, well, that's what I want. That's what I want. And here's what I know. Right now, how you're dating and what's going on in your life, that's your present, okay? And someday your present will become your past. And when it becomes your past, it does what we never expect. It sometimes comes up and interrupts your future. That just happens. You ask any married couple about this, and this is, they're thinking just like you. This is the way I am right now, but when I get married, things are going to change. I'm going to be so honorable, and I'm going to, treat women right and all this stuff. That won't happen. You put on a tux, and a woman puts on a wedding dress. It doesn't change you. It just makes you look nicer, at least for the day. So let me just throw in one more quality, and then I'll leave the rest for you to read. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not self-seeking. Now, if I were to ask you, how many of you enjoy being around a selfish, self-interested, self-seeking, self-centered person? Nobody wants that. But I'm telling you that this whole thing, finding the one, can be blind. Somebody can sometimes hold back their selfish tendencies, where their goal in life is going to be for you to love them as much as they do, And they won't show that to you until you get married. And then all of a sudden you realize they're in love with themselves. They're trying to get me to love them as much as they love them. And I'm telling you, that is a recipe for disaster. See, the self-preoccupied person is not looking for a way to give and receive love. They're looking for fans. They're looking for somebody, who will just, treat them like the treasure while they sometimes treat other people like dirt. Don't let this sabotage you. This is the person you want to become, the person who is unselfish, whose life isn't centered around themselves and around their looks and around their popularity and around their glamour and around how many people fawn over them, because that's a recipe for problems. That's who you're looking for. Become who the person that you're looking for is looking for. Now, I realize that, I've been talking about some very unnatural things that, people just don't talk about too much in our culture. What comes naturally, this is the thing, what comes naturally is passion. Chemistry, man, that comes very, naturally. But here's the problem. You can get fooled because you can have chemistry with thousands of people, not just the one. In fact, you can have chemistry with somebody who could ruin your life. And that's why this is so important to understand. Real love that lasts, doesn't come naturally. You have to grow into it. And it requires some soul searching. It requires some people listening to people who love you and what they have to say about you. It requires saying no to the stuff in your life that you would normally say yes to, and saying yes to some of the things you would normally say no to. But God will help you. He will give you strength. If this is who you want to become, He will give you the power to become this. What I would like to see in myself and probably in you is I want to become someone who's worth seeking out. I want to become the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for. See, Walt Disney, he's become famous for, all of his stuff, but the problem is they're fairy tales, okay? In other words, fairies tell them, and they're not true. They're not true by any sense of the imagination. Now, I love them. I used to read them when I was a little kid, okay? But they don't show the ending. Like, the last scene in Snow White, is her and Prince Charming, going off happily ever after and so on. They don't show them a year later in therapy, trying to work out their marriage. They don't show the 7 dwarfs, like in PTSD therapy, They're for little kids. And here's the deal, okay? The love chapter goes on to say this. This is so important to understand. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I become a man, when I became a woman, I put the ways of childhood behind me. If you think that if you find the right person, that will take care of everything and you'll live happily ever after, that's a fairy tale. That's a myth. So here's my question. Will you learn how to love? Will you become the right person? Will you learn how to be somebody that another person longs to be with and treasure forever? Because it's not an easy journey, but I'm telling you, it's worthwhile. And it will save you a lot of heartache. If you go after it, and you have to have your own way, and you have to have pleasure, and you have to have it now, that is a recipe for disaster. Choose becoming the right person, because God will help you with that. He won't help you, get your own way. He won't help you have nonstop pleasure, or He won't help you to have everything you want now. He won't help with that. But He will help you and give you power to become a person who knows how to love. He just needs our cooperation. Let's pray. God, I know that this is a sticky area, and it's a place that has created unbelievable heartache in our world. We've all played the fool in this. We've all been fooled. We've all been duped. We've all had our hearts broken. And I would pray, Lord, that You will help us to minimize the pain in our lives by becoming the person that You have called us to be. You've called us to love. You are loving. You want us to learn how to do this because it is so powerful. And I pray that Your Spirit would give us all the power we need to say no to the things that would wreck our relationships and yes to those that will build them. In the name of Jesus, amen. So may God fill your hearts with love. May God fill your hearts with courage to look at yourself and to become the person that God has called you to be and to find what you really want.